our series, The Rich Life, a study of biblical finances, and my greatest blessing is you all came back. Pastors worry sometimes about talking about money, but how important is that? Money and possessions and what you've been blessed with and what you do with them, right? We all compare ourselves to someone. What we compare ourselves to, what we'd like to have. We all heard of the Joneses, right? They have that perfect house, perfect family, picket fence around their home, the perfect car, great job, seem to have everything going in their lives. And we compare ourselves to them, and we always we want something more. We want that. Well, last week we tried to look at what we have. We want to look at what has God blessed us with. We want to look at what earthly riches are versus spiritual riches. What real spiritual riches are. What does the rich life look like? We all have that image in our minds, right? What it looks like to be living a rich life. We want to look at the rich life and what God has for us. So I would like you to turn, if you would, to Luke 16, 1 to 15, and we're going to read this parable by Jesus. It's the first part of 3 sections of material possession parables. He's going to talk about this shrewd manager. He goes on with a short section to talk about the Pharisees who love money, and he'll end up with the rich man and Lazarus. So we're going to have an overview of this parable after we read it. So I wanted to give you that opportunity to get there. Luke 16, 1 to 15. If our versions are not the same, follow along, please. Jesus told this story to his disciples. There was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. And one day a report came that the manager was wasting his employer's money. So the employer called him in and said, "What is this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you are going to be fired." Well, the manager thought to himself, "What now? Now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg. Oh, I know how to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired." So he invited each person in who owed money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, "How much do you owe him?" And the man replied, "I owe him 800 gallons of olive oil." And so the manager told him, "Well, take the bill and quickly change it to 400 gallons. "And how much do you owe my employer?" he asked the next man. He said, "I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat," was the reply. And here the manager said, "Well, take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. Now the rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. Here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends, and then, when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. If you are faithful in little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. And if you are untrustworthy about worldly wealth, who will trust you with the true riches of heaven? And if you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with things of your own? No one can serve 2 masters, for you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money." Well, the Pharisees, who dearly loved their money, heard all of this and scoffed at him. And then he said to them, "You like to appear righteous in public, but God knows your hearts. What this world honors is detestable in the sight of God." So we looked last week at the rich life, what you have. Today we're going to be looking at the rich life, what you give. So let's look at this. We actually have a parable being told by Jesus where on the surface it appears he's commending a dishonest manager. Even his boss, the wealthy man that he was serving, said, "Look at what he's doing. He's doing a great thing there." So we have to look at this in more detail, and when you see they were dealing more in commodities and interest than they were in the actual price or value of what he was looking at. So really, he was forgiving his portion, his dishonest portion. He had added to the price of the wheat and the oil. So he really wasn't doing anything dishonest. He was just giving up what he had invested in them. And what it actually did was make his rich man that he served look good to those men. So we have to realize that even someone who acted dishonestly could do something that we would find commendable. And we're going to learn from him today. So you have to understand, in those days, the law was that a owner was not legally responsible for the misdeeds of someone who worked under him. He wasn't affected by the illegal deeds of his employee. And basically, by forgiving these debts, it made him look better. So Jesus here is going to start talking about how we see our worldly possessions in relation to and in reference to heavenly ones. So, as you turn in your notes, what can we learn from this shrewd manager? Well, first thing that shows us is that we can learn good things even though bad people. First, this shows us we can learn good things even from bad people. And what we can learn is our money is not our own. Verse 1 says, and Jesus told the story to his disciples, there was a certain rich man who had a manager handling his affairs. And one day a report came to the manager that the manager was wasting the employer's money. Our money is not our own. His money was not his own. He was managing the rich man's money. We are stewards of the money God allots to us. But you might say, oh, God didn't give me the money, I earned it. That money is mine. I worked for it. Everything is the Lord's. If we look at Psalm 24:1, it says, the earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all its people belong to him. So our view of what we have is important. Look at it this way. If someone lent you their car, you would drive that car maybe a little differently than your own car. You would take the turns a little slower, maybe drive a little slower. They would really want to not make sure. You wouldn't be taking your 2-year-old to McDonald's drive-thru, right? You wouldn't want to mess up that car. It isn't your car. You've been given stewardship of that car for a short period of time, and you want to make sure you can give that back in as good a shape or even better than when you got it. We have to understand it all belongs to him, to God. And he has ultimate control over it. Now, Satan's in charge of this world. God gave Adam the deed to the world. Adam sinned, and now Satan has that deed. But Jesus bought that deed back. And we find in Revelation that deed, the scroll will be opened, and that deed will be given back to Christ, and the world will be his. But at this time, Satan's in charge. But he's not in complete control. He's already lost that deed. We know that. But everything in this world, everything you have, everything that you find of any value is all yours. We talked last week about what you have. We talked about you have yourselves, you have your values, you have your effort, your time, and your worship. You have things that come from that you can give your burdens to Christ, that your faith can be grown, that you'll be ready for those moments that God gives you, and that there will be blessings at the end of it if you do what you should do with what God has given you. And it is all about your attitude we talked about last week, and this is no different. What you have is not yours, it is God's. So how we steward then is not a secret. How we steward, how we take care of the money is not a secret. Verse 2, so the employer called him in and said, what is this I hear about you? Get your report in order because you're going to be fired. It will be clear to others how we handle our finances. It will show to everyone where your heart is. Now, if you give offering here You're giving that money back to God. No one knows about it except those in the financial department. Dave will know about it potentially. But God knows it. So we're not all going to know what you give. I told you last week, I don't want to know what you give. I want that to be between you and the Lord. And today's message is going to be about what your attitude is about what you have and about giving that back. And how important it is to hold on to what you have now, or is it more important to give back and to give to others and set up heavenly riches, riches in heaven? What we have is a gift. It's our resources, our talents. So let me ask you, how are you using those things? How are you using them? You don't have to answer. Don't raise your hand or shout it out. But you know how you're using what God has given you. How you steward depends on your viewpoint of the riches themselves. Proverbs 14:8 says, "The prudent understand where they are going, but fools deceive themselves." The wise pay close attention to how they conduct themselves with reference to God's finances. They are concerned about how they are perceived, but the unwise focus on deception and secrecy, focusing on the now rather than preparing for the future. So the next thing we can learn is we need to be thinking of the future. Verses 3 and 4, the manager thought to himself, now what? My boss has fired me. I don't have the strength to dig ditches, and I'm too proud to beg. Oh, I know. How to ensure that I'll have plenty of friends who will give me a home when I'm fired. He starts thinking into the future. How can I take care of my own personal security? So this isn't something else that he needs to be commended for. All too often, our focus is on the here and now. This manager was not focusing on the now, but on his future. He was unskilled. He had no way to support himself. So he said, I'll be good to these people, and when I'm out of money and I need a meal, they'll be grateful to me for the things I forgave them, and they will take care of me. And that's actually what the rich man commends him on later on. He needed to figure out his future well-being, his personal security. Now, we don't have to agree with everything someone says or does to learn something from them. If you need to go and have an operation on your brain, and you meet the brain surgeon, you're not going to ask him when the last time he went to church was, how much he gave an offering last week, when he was saved. You're going to ask him, have you ever done this before, and do you know what you're doing when you cut into my brain? So we can learn things even from people that aren't doing things we would agree with. If we read Proverbs 16:9, it says this, we can make our plans, but the Lord determines our steps. God determines the result of our plans. I know that's not new to any of you. God determines the result of our plans. Only those plans that are approved by God will succeed. And we need to focus where God is taking us. Proverbs 23:5 says, in the blink of an eye, wealth disappears. It will sprout wings and fly away like an eagle. It's foolish to hold on to or chase money. Now, in the ancient world, a bird flying off symbolized fleeting wealth. That's how quickly what we have, and we might put all of our trust and all of our faith and all of our thought process into, could be gone like that. Could be gone like that. What we hold in this to be worthwhile in our lives and what we think we're holding on to for our security could be gone in a second. So, if we're truly to focus on the future and God is ultimately in control of the success of our plans, then our view of money and how we use it must change. We need to think in reference to the future. We need to invest in people's eternity instead of personal gain. Let's look at verses 5 through 9. And so he invited each person who owed him money to his employer to come and discuss the situation. He asked the first one, how much do I owe you? How much do you owe him? The man replied, I owe him 800 gallons of oil. So the manager said, take the bill, quickly change it to 400 gallons. "And how much do you owe my employer?" he asked the next man. "And I owe him 1,000 bushels of wheat." And he replied, "Here, the manager, take the bill and change it to 800 bushels. The rich man had to admire the dishonest rascal for being so shrewd. And it is true that the children of this world are more shrewd in the dealing with the world around them than are the children of light. So here's the lesson. Use your worldly resources to benefit others and make friends. And then when your possessions are gone, they will welcome you to an eternal home. We need to invest in people's eternity instead of personal gain. The shrewd manager ended up helping the creditors and making his master look good. It was from selfish motives, but that's what he was doing. And that's what we can learn from. That we need to look at what we have, the things that we talked about last week, yourselves, your time, your efforts, those things, we need to look at them with an eternal perspective. How can we lay up treasures in heaven versus fill our bank account? Now, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm saying. There's nothing wrong with investments, 401ks, a bank account. We're called to be wise with our money and to be good stewards with what God gives us. But it's how do you view that, and how do you give that back to the Lord? How do you give it back what is not yours, a portion of that back? That's what he calls us to do. How do you use your resources to help others? Partially by giving money here, it helps others, right? And it helps the ministry of this church and prepares us. It gives us the ability to have us join here. We're not out in the parking lot in the rain. We're under a beautiful roof and a beautiful building, but you are the church. But we've been blessed with this. Keeping the lights on, that's all part of what you're doing, but it also goes to ministry. It all goes to outreach. But what do you do privately? There are tithes and there are offerings. What do you offer out of your money? How can you help others in need? How do you give of your time? How do you volunteer? These are the things that we need to think about, those things. How do you fill your time, and how do those things look? What does that look like? If we're keeping our eternity in mind, then our money focus should be our treasure in heaven. We should build up others. We should invest in others. We should not be looking at advancing ourselves. We should invest in people's eternity instead of personal gain. We tend to always want just a little more, don't we? We want just a little more. We have a car, it's running fine, but boy, I could really like to have a new one. Or I'd like one that has this in it. Or my house, it's okay. Well, I would love to have it fixed up. Again, it's all your eternal perspective. Those things aren't bad. It's how they relate to what are you setting your priorities on. If we want to invest in people's eternity and help them get to heaven, Ecclesiastes 5:10 says this, "Those who love money will never have enough. How meaningless to think that wealth brings true happiness." Well, that's the truth. We all know that, right? We can strive for more and more money, but that isn't going to make us happy. Jesus says, "Blessed are those." Blessed means happy are those. To be happy, we need to have that eternal perspective in mind. We just want just a little bit more. But if we're eternally minded, we're going to be looking at how can we do just a little bit more for God. You remember, it doesn't say that money is the root of all kinds of evil. It says the love of money, setting your focus on that, making that more important than other people. Luke 12:15 says, and then he said, "Beware, guard against every kind of greed. Life is not measured by how much you own." How many of us do measure ourselves by the job we have, the money in the bank, the car we drive, the house we have? That's part of who we are. That's what this is talking about. Jesus is telling this parable because he's got the Pharisees as an audience here who love money more than God. How many of us love money more than God? You know, it says, beware, guard against every kind of greed. Well, greed is never satisfied, folks. It's always going to be me, 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 me. It's always going to be that. But greed seeks worldly things, but that's not equal to true living, a rich life. Material possessions can become an object of our worship. And that's idolatry. That's making yourself an idol and making something more important than God. Faithfulness with a little now leads to opportunities with more later. Verse 10 says, if you are faithful in the little things, you will be faithful in large ones. But if you are dishonest in little things, you won't be honest with greater responsibilities. How you view and handle money now will determine how much you will be entrusted with in the future. I'm going to turn back really quick to Matthew 25, verse 14 through 30. This is a parable of the three servants. It's also similar in another gospel to the talents. It says, again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities, and he then left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with the 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money. After a long time, their master returned from his trip and called them to give an account of how they had used his money. The servant to whom he had entrusted the 5 bags of silver came forward with 5 more and said, Master, you gave me 5 bags of silver to invest, and I've earned 5 more. The master was full of praise. Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. The servant who had received the 2 bags of silver came forward and said, Master, you gave me 2 bags of silver to invest, and I have earned 2 more. The master said, Well done, my good and faithful servant. You have been faithful in handling this small amount, so now I will give you many more responsibilities. Let's celebrate together. Well, then the servant with the 1 bag of silver came and said, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, harvesting crops that you didn't plant and gathering crops you didn't cultivate. I was afraid I would lose your money, and so I hid it in the earth. Look, here is your money back. But the master replied, You wicked and lazy servant, if you knew I harvested crops I didn't plant and gathered crops I didn't cultivate, why didn't you deposit my money in the bank? At least I would have gotten some interest on it. And then he ordered, Take the money from that servant and give it to the one who has the 10 bags of silver. To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. Now throw this worthless, useless servant into outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. If you are desiring more without valuing what you have, how can you expect God to bless you with more? We all just keep asking God for better this, more this, a better that. But what are we doing with what we have already? You know, if you have a job and you desire a promotion, you can't just sit back and skate through the job you're doing, because you're never going to earn the right to get the promotion. How many people out there believe that? Well, I'll just do my job and one day I'll get it, and then get angry when the guy next to him, who works his tail off, gets the promotion. Well, I've been here longer. I should have gotten that. You need to do the job without the title. You need to work hard at what you're doing, and then you will be blessed with that promotion. Well, it's the same thing with how we use our money. God will bless us if we have the right view of and bless others with money instead of hoarding it for ourselves. Verse 29 of that said this, To those who use well what they are given, even more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who do nothing, even what little they have will be taken away. This is a parable about using and investing what we have, our money, our abilities, our time. The 5 bags of silver, the 2, and the 1. They can be equivalent to what abilities we have. What do you do with what God has given you? Are you doing anything with it? Tom talked about it in Sunday school. Are you just sitting back and resting in your salvation and not growing and not moving forward and not trying to bring others to know the Lord? What are you doing with what God has given you? Salvation is one of those things God has given you. He paid a big price for it. What are you doing with it? Are you holding it to yourself? Very happy you're there, praising his name that he did that for you, but are you running out in front of this speeding train that's about to go over the cliff and trying to wave your arms and stop it and say, I have a way that you can be saved? To your friends, to your family, are you living that out in front of them? That is something you can do with what you've been given. The wicked servant failed to do good and to use what God had entrusted to him. And it was a sin. And it will result in losing what you have. Separation. He was separated from God, thrown into the pit. We are to grow and develop the resources God entrusted to us. Our focus needs to change direction. Our focus needs to change direction. Verses 11 and 12. And if you are untrustworthy with worldly wealth, who will trust you with true riches of heaven? And if you are not faithful with other people's things, why should you be trusted with the things of your own? What do you place your security in? Your investments, your 401k, your retirement, your savings account? If you're retiring, Fran and I have a good friend. He worked for years, pinched and saved and didn't take opportunities to maybe bless because he was always looking for that retirement. And he's gotten to retirement and things physically are happening. He's not able to enjoy the retirement like he thought. There's a story in the Bible about the man who said, it's time to, I have everything I need. I have my storehouse is full. I can sit back, eat, drink, and be merry. And it says, you fool, today your time has come to an end. What are you putting your security on? What are you putting your place in? Is it in eternal riches? Is it in something that will last for eternity? Wouldn't it be something to be able to stand there as people enter heaven and see those that you played a part in, like Tom just talked about, the gentleman was married, played a part in, they're coming to know the Lord and ending up in heaven. Is there a money amount, a price that can be put on that? No, there isn't. If this could go away, if our money could go away in an instant, why wouldn't we focus on our treasure in heaven? Do you give back to the Lord your money, your time, and your abilities? How do you spend your time? Because you got to realize something, time can never be gotten back. This hour you're spending here in church today, if you came just for the service, or the whole morning that you were here, that time can never be gotten back. But you spent it well if you're here with fellow Christians and trying to learn from his word in Sunday school and hear from his word here in worship. But remember how you spend your time. It can never be gotten back. Time can never be gotten back. Proverbs 11:28 says, trust in your money and down you go. But the godly flourish like leaves in the spring. Security and prosperity are determined by the object of our faith. What is the focus of your faith? You have a choice to make. You can place your faith in earthly wealth or making your goal creating treasure in heaven. Our goals need to be examined. Our goals need to be examined. Verse 13, no one can serve two masters, for you will hate one and love the other, or you will be devoted to one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and be enslaved to money. If we were all in here able to see how you manage your finances, would we see your goals to be your job status, your bank account, a better house, cars, clothes? You fill in the blank. Now, they're all important. But what do you place your priority in? Are you serving those things rather than serving God? Are you focusing on those things more than you are focusing on God? Where you're focusing your money, you can't serve both personal desires and the things of God. Everything we have or do can be used by God. Did you know that? Every gift He has given you, I've talked about it before, you are each unique in God's eyes. You're that perfect key for that perfect lock that He has planned for you. Because of your spiritual gifts and all the other things that make you up in your experiences, they are unique to you. How can God, when He's looking for that perfect key for a lock He needs undoing, He's going to look down and He's going to see you and say, that's the person I need to put in their life and help unlock Jesus Christ to them. How are you viewing what God has given you? Romans 14:12 says, yes, each of us will give a personal account to God. How does that feel? Again, Tom talked about that this morning. We're going to give a personal account to God. We're not going to be judged whether or not we're going to go to hell. But our lives are going to be looked at just like the parable I read in Matthew. When He returns, He's going to say, what did you do with what I gave you? How did you spend it? Or did you just dig a hole and put it in the ground and wait for Him to come back? We will be made accountable for the desires of our heart. How we give our treasures reflects our true hearts. How we give our treasures reflects our true hearts. Verses 14 and 15. This is the Pharisees now. The Pharisees who dearly loved their money heard all of this and scoffed at Him. And then He said to them, and that word scoffed is the same word written about the Pharisees at the foot of the cross, as they were scoffing and making fun of Jesus up on the cross. It's the same word. Heard all of this and scoffed at Him, and then He said to them, you like to appear righteous in public, but God knows your hearts. What this world honors is detestable in the sight of God. So how does your life reflect? How does your heart reflect your focus? I think that's such a huge sentence. What this world honors is detestable in the sight of God. If you're a follower of Jesus Christ, all you have to do is look around you and you can see that this world doesn't follow anything righteous, anything holy, anything worthy of God. How does your life reflect that? What the world honors is detestable in the sight of God. Matthew 6:21. We talked about this last week. Wherever your treasure is, there the desires of your heart will also be. So is your treasure in heaven? Or is it here? Storing your treasure in heaven includes sharing with others, giving back, and paying forward. Isn't that really what we're called to do? We've been saved, now we need to pay that forward and help others to be saved as well. So, when you leave here today and you're thinking, and you don't have the radio on and you don't have something distracting you, ask yourself, do I have a rich life? Is the cornerstone of my life Jesus? Is it what I built my life on? Is it what creates and holds together the foundation of my life? Now, it doesn't mean if you have a list of problems and things going on and sicknesses and bill problems and all those things, that doesn't mean you don't have a rich life. That's what I really want you to realize. It really doesn't have anything to do, because the rich life is just recognizing what God has given you and then deciding how you're going to give it back to Him and to others in His name. It's not about money. God wants you to be blessed. It's not the things the world says that makes you rich that make you rich. It's how we use what God has given us, our focus, our goals. Here's a big one, our motivation for what we do, our purpose, what drives us. Using what he has left in our care. It's all his. Don't forget that. Everything you have, from the clothes on your back to the money in your wallet or in your purse, the car you drove here in, the house you're going to go back to, the family you've been given, the friends you've been given, they're all from God. Boy, that changes your perspective pretty quickly, or should, when you realize you had nothing to do with those things, that God had placed them there. We all like to think we caused those things to happen, but no. And then when you realize that they were something given to you by God, then it should change. Okay, then what am I going to do with them? I'm driving this person's car. How am I going to take care of it? And am I going to make sure the car is cleaned and detailed and better than it was when I got it? And I'm going to give it back to him. That's what those silver bags were. What are you doing with what you were given? How are you using what he's given you? Is it for him? Closing, what are you doing with what you've been given? And can God trust you with more? Heavy statement. I don't hear a lot of laughter today. This is a little heavy, right? Talking about money, it takes a lot of self-reflection. But today could be a day where it turns totally around, where you change direction, you shift from where you're going to another direction. This could be the day right now where you start looking at what God has given you in a different way. Because remember, it can be gone in an instant. But what you set in your treasure in heaven can never be lost, will never be gone. And you'll get to see again when you get there, as like the rich owner, and when he came back, he said, "Well done, good and faithful servant." Let's celebrate. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, I thank you for what's in your word. I know that Jesus talks more about money than anything else in all of the Gospels, because it is such a temptation to focus on it, drive after it, chase after it, value it more than you, more than what you've given us. Patting ourselves on the back for what we have, giving ourselves acknowledgement that we did it when we have nothing that you didn't allow for us to have and desire for us to use for you. I thank you for everyone in this room who's heard this message today. I thank you for everyone here who loves you enough to say, I might have to reevaluate what I have in the light of whose it is and who gave it to me to steward. We love you, Lord. We praise your name. We are in awe of you. We are humbled by you. And we want to be and walk in a right relationship with you, Lord. So work in each one of us. If you don't know the Lord today, a lot of this made no sense to you. Storing up treasures in heaven when you can't pay your bills makes no sense. If you know the Lord and you're a child of God and you're walking in his light, then all of this made sense. Even if you're not there yet, this is the beginning of a change, of a shift. So Lord, please work within each person here. And if someone doesn't know you, talk to their heart today, Lord, and bring them to talk to myself or one of the elders as we can lead them into a whole new life with you. We love you and we praise you in Jesus' name. Amen.